I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Ridelli remains on vacation, but Andrew Kuo takes no days off. Mr. Andrew Kuo, how are you on this brisk, beautiful autumn, maybe autumn-esque afternoon?
Pretty good, man. I'm on the streets reporting live from New York Fashion Week. It's crazy out here. I'm potting from wherever I'm at, which is everywhere in New York right now. It's wild.
Are you at Digital Fashion Week as we speak?
I'm on those digital streets, man.
There is a Digital Fashion Week, though. It's real.
Yeah. Has anyone done it right or well or especially well yet?
I don't know. I'm only waiting for Friend of the Pod's show this afternoon, Colleen Estrada, 4 o'clock. I don't know if you'll hear this by the time this starts, but Friend of the Pod, part of the Cookies Hoops inaugural tournament. So that's on this afternoon. I'm excited to see it.
They balled out.
But I don't know how it's going to work overall. There will obviously be a newfound accessibility to the masses in a way that is very different from the Anna Wintour front row only and invite, way of doing fashion shows in the past. Sure, cool, whatever. Everything is different now.
Everything's different and the same. And this was kind of already happening before COVID really hit. Fashion Week was kind of losing its oomph for years, right?
For sure. You had a lot of brands, companies, designers moving off the calendar. And when I say the calendar, I mean the sort of fall,
industry speak.
Winter,
Nice.
Industry speak, yeah. Fall, winter, resort. You know what I'm saying. But you had people saying, well, I can just do this whenever I want, whenever I feel like it. And I'm going to do a show. I can put it online. I can get people there if I have enough clout. Why am I bothering? So absolutely, that was a trend that's been happening for a while. And especially even in New York, you had, I think, less emphasis on like Fashion Week itself. And you had more people wanting to show in Paris because that's kind of where more business happens.
Yeah. And this is all technology, right? It's about being able to stream your stuff, people's accessibility to buy your products all year round. Your favorite idea, the idea of Fashion Week catering to middlemen, so middlemen can get you these products. They're kind of rendered a little bit less powerful with the internet, right?
I did see that your guy, Oscar de la Renta,
my dude,
your man's and them, has signed on with Amazon. So that was a big domino to fall in terms of Amazon selling luxury wear. So I've seen some hand-wringing over that.
Yeah.
Middleman versus the fashion industry, which has kept them at bay for a long time.
Yeah, and Cookies listeners will know that we have an entertaining and lively debate about the strength of the middleman economy and the ethics of it. I'm kind of agnostic about it. Some middlemen do good by us and give us some cool products. Like if we want something and we can't get it, sometimes someone could procure it for us digitally, in person, however. And then sometimes they just get in the way. But Amazon doing a high-end luxury thing.
I like your literal description of a middleman.
Well, because
someone who could get something for you that you can't otherwise. I know I'm impressed. It was like a literal definition of middleman. It avoided all the freighted parts of like technology and usurping the power from brands or consumers. You're just like the literal procurers.
Well, before we start cackling and dragging them, it has to be talked about, right? Like before we drag a basketball player, we got to be like, oh, they're good, but let's go in now, you know. But I think Amazon doing this stuff makes logical sense. It was a matter of time, right? And people will copy them. And I think certain brands have fared better with technology than other brands. And it's interesting to see the blockbuster effect. Some brands that are powerful don't really quite update as fast.
We'll see how it works. I don't know that people necessarily really want that experience. But again, we're dealing with some uncharted territory.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of the Travis Scott McDonald's thing, man. Like, there's a certain portion of the scene that frowns upon it, and there's a certain portion of the scene that is hyped on it.
Are people hyped on it? I don't know.
Yeah, man. There was lines for this stuff, and kids like it. But us old heads tend to think it's a kind of a sellout move, and we never really got on board with McDonald's.
Of course, kids like Travis Scott, and they like
McDonald's.
merch, and they can afford McDonald's, and it's accessible. So I understand that level of enthusiasm. I feel like I saw some kids talking about it, and they were like, yeah, but it's not special food. It's just a combo pack.
Yeah.
Like that, there isn't necessarily. I'm not 100% sure that there's not like, oh, Travis Scott invented a new burg. Like here's a new burg bubble.
Yeah, but it's a scene, right? It's instead of going to shows, this is the way of hanging out. Like, this is just a thing you can do instead of like hanging out in front of a stoop on St. Mark's, in front of a record shop, not buying any records. People are just doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way of putting it. And also, McDonald's is obviously not healthy food. I can't advocate people buying it. I can't say, yeah, go out there and get yourself some McDonald's. That's a great idea. I also ate a lot of it when I was a kid, as I assume that most teens do in general, that you eat garbage fast food.
You didn't have
frequently.
Sweet Green in Rochester in
1972.
I was going to say.
I don't think teens eat at Sweet Green. I think teenagers eat fast food. I mean, that's probably shifted a bit, but overall, I would guess that a lot of the consumers for Burger King, fast food, Taco Bell, are teenagers or people in their 20s. Don't have much money, don't have the health concerns that adults would have, or older folk. And I don't know. So again, I can't sit here and say, oh, that's so cool that that's going to encourage people to buy McDonald's. I also don't hold it against Travis Scott that much, because he's never been someone I thought of as like a paragon of any sort of integrity is the wrong word, but he stands for something other than kind of selling things.
Who is an entertainer who is a paragon of ethics? Who would you think of?
Like Common, he would never do an advertisement for a company that he didn't believe in.
Never.
You know, like Microsoft artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a single artist we can think of that's truly popular who is free of this judgment?
I mean, Long John Silver's was trying to get J.R. Ryder for years, and he always turned him down. Inspector Deck would not fuck with Wendy's.
I mean, there's Shaquille O'Neal for Radio Shack. There was I want McDonald's to throw out that offer to Mac McClung, double Mac, 2 Macs.
But I do think there is slightly more of an objection to a company like McDonald's, which does make a bad product. It's a bad product. It's not something that's advisable to eat. Not that it's going to kill you if you do it once in a while, but it's just not a great product. It's a little different from saying like Radio Shack or, I don't know.
But Jimmy Butler's selling beer, right?
Right. I was gonna go there and say,
yeah.
But athletes endorse beer or soda or all types of products that are not ideally healthy.
Yeah, like I remember when Bloomberg tried to install a soda tax in New York City, and there was a lot of different takes on that. And then I guess one person pointed out that if you go to Jean Georges, the calorie count for one of his standard prefix dinners was just like astronomical. Like it was like if you had that 3 times in a week, you would just be dead. And it's like, why don't we put a warning on his food? It's like, well, right. This is kind of a policy. Demonizing McDonald's is kind of like a traditional way of saying something else.
Yeah, I would say that I'm trying to think of other basketball players who have endorsed like better restaurants than McDonald's. I don't know. I'm sure it happens. Like Kevin Durant had a steakhouse.
Yeah.
Do I think the calorie count at a Kevin Durant steakhouse was less than McDonald's? Definitely not.
I think your boy Shake Milton, if I'm not mistaken, like promotes a plant-based meat alternative. Because I made a joke. I think I was saying like Shake Milton should work for a certain burger company, and someone was like, "Oh, he already is like kind of a spokesperson for this." And we've talked about these fake meats a lot, and it feels like the fever pitch has died down for these items, but they're still doing well. I had one the other day. They're awesome, but they're not healthy.
But back to Travis Scott. He's someone who kind of stands for like commercialization of culture, of sounds, and he's always been someone I find very hard to kind of like narrow in on. I don't know what he thinks about anything. It's hard for me even to imagine his face. He's just this holographic presence in many ways, and not only in Fortnite.
Yeah, man, I agree. When he has a show at MSG, I go straight to look for the merch and see what the merch looks like, and I think it's a thing. You see a lot of people wearing his stuff that week, that month in New York, and I think it's maybe too simple to call it branding, but he's a thing, not only an artist, and there's no coincidence there because he's married to some marketing geniuses, or he's a part of a family who are marketing geniuses, and Travis Scott is a blob of opportunity that's hard to pinpoint.
Yeah, even his voice, due to the auto-tune that he sings, that he raps, I don't necessarily recognize it instantaneously until there's like it's lit.
Which seems a very like a boomer thing, but yeah, where did 21 Savage go, man? I miss that era, like that pre-SoundCloud era of rap music a little bit. Time flies, man.
I don't mind auto-tune stuff.
Oh no,
but there are some guys who just use it all the time, and I kind of sometimes feel like I don't know what their voice really sounds like.
Oh, I'm so into that. It's like talking to somebody on Twitter for 10 years, but it's not their real name or their avatar, but you know them, and you finally meet them. It's like, oh, I know so much about you, but I'm not how you look.
The ones that I can't really get it too much into are like A Boogie and them. There's just something like frail about their auto-tune voice. It's so thin.
Yeah, now auto-tune is a spectrum, right?
Yeah, it's not like Future, who speaks to my soul.
Is Future one of the great artists this country has ever produced? I was thinking about that because I was walking through Central Park and
thinking about Future.
Someone was blasting Future in Central Park, which was jarring because usually it's a bunch of jazz music or strings, buskers playing music under overpasses. But I heard someone blasting Future, and it sounded beautiful. And people walking by were just like bopping their head, singing along. And I'm like, he's one of our great artists, man. He's like John Denver.
Many people are saying that. More and more people have equated Future with John Denver.
Yeah.
Rocky Mountain High.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Future. I think when they did the Spotify like best of the decade, and I think I listened to him more than anyone else. I remember yours was actually Victor Oladipo, which was kind of weird.
I'm just a part of the Oladipo army. So if you take me on, you're gonna take all of us on. So you should tread lightly. I love Victor Oladipo. Come on, man.
Oh, Depot Hive?
What was the most listenable rap crossover project ever? Is it Shaq and Fushnikins? Was there anything that you heard featuring an NBA player that you were just like, oh, that's just part of music?
Oh, you're just begging me to talk about basketball's best kept secret? like just throwing up the lob so I can windmill home my knowledge of...
I'm sliding less gruel under the door for you.
So do you remember that album?
Yeah.
So it was called Basketball's Best Kept Secret. I want to say it came out mid-90s. Certainly not late 90s. Maybe even early 90s. But it was a collaborative album that featured many different producers, many different established rappers, and a ton of basketball players. Every track had a different basketball player on it. It's kind of fun to listen to now, even though a lot of the songs are not good. But Jason Kidd raps on a song. Chris Mills raps on a song. I mean, I could just Google it and list them all off. But it's a bunch of different guys. Like J.R. Ryder curses and talks about smoking weed. Speaking of J.R. Ryder. The best rappers on it are Cedric Ceballos, who I think does a song with maybe Warren G, and Dana Barrows, who was kind of a East Coast enthusiast, sort of rapping about stages and mics, kind of Black Moonish MC. None of those are that listenable, I gotta say. Even the tracks with Dana Barrows and like Sadat X.
Wow. The Bob Dylan of rap. Yeah.
It's kind of
It's still a novelty, right? It still feels like these are a bunch of Chris Mills-ass rappers instead of Shaq just effortlessly being on your radio.
Just floating over that track.
Fushnikins. Like, there's nothing close, right?
I mean, look, you know my opinion on this. It's
I do.
Allen Iverson 40 bars. Come on.
Was that whole album ever leaked?
I've heard about 5 or 6 songs off of it.
Yeah, same.
I mean, it's definitely a very violent content.
Yeah.
I understand why he was urged to shelve it.
Yeah, I think even people on his team, his marketing team, his PR person was probably like, maybe we don't want this heat. But
go back. It's on YouTube. You can find most of them.
Yeah.
40 bars goes pretty hard.
Yeah.
Pretty hard. Pretty hard.
I like to think of it as like a Gravediggers kind of like, it was a vibe. You had to be there.
Who are we forgetting here? There's got to be someone. I mean, Kobe was terrible.
C-Web.
C-Web did beats for Nas.
But he also had a whole album, right? Humility Records, Too Much Drama. I'm very familiar with this.
Do you care about Dame Lillard's bars?
I do. But not in a real way. For jokes.
Yes.
I care very much for jokes. Like, if he drops a new track today, I will listen the hell out of it.
I'm going to say, and then I'm going to move off this terrible subject. I'm going to say I think Iman Shumpert might have been the best rapper, basketball player. He wasn't incredibly good, but he was kind of good. And not in the Dame Lillardy way.
I'm frustrated by Shumpert's career because he was primed to be a pop or like kind of more of a household name, but his game never quite translated to him staying relevant in the NBA. You know, we're talking about Doc Shumpert, who delivered his own child. We're talking about one of the coolest looking guys who's married to one of a popular artist, Tiana Taylor, and I just think he was primed for some sort of awesome exposure, but his game, he was awesome during Linsanity, man. I was a huge fan.
Speaking of Fashion Week, I remember grabbing quotes from both Tiana Taylor and Iman Shumpert, or at least Iman Shumpert, maybe both of them, at an opening ceremony party that they were attending. And Iman was so proud of her and was so excited that she had done that video for Kanye. She'd come out on stage and like performed and kind of danced at one of his shows, and he was like so proud, and was just a really charming, affable, bright guy. Like, made me really like Shumpert a lot. And I do wish he had figured out a way to stick around the league as a 3-and-D guy with a little more success than he's had, because he was a good athlete, good defender, just couldn't really get a reliable jumper that he could just sort of repeatedly stick.
And his injuries kind of zapped his defensive prowess a little bit.
Yeah.
But he did it. It was awesome. We're still talking about him. So shout out to New York Knicks legend Iman Shumpert.
Yeah, I thought he had. I mean, I was not alone. I think we all, as people who lived in New York, were pretty excited about him as a prospect when he was, introduced to the league. He was kind of electrifying.
He's kind of the Knicks T-shirt I wear the most, and I have them all. I got Eddie House, but where were you when Shump Sanity happened? Everyone knows where they were.
Where was I in 2011? I've gone over this, man. I don't know anything about 2010 or 2011. I have no concept. Just no idea.
Right.
The NBA was weird then too.
Yeah.
Like, those championships make no sense. It's like Dallas kind of won and Heat won. It was like pre LeBron. It was just a weird time that the Lakers won with Pau Gasol. 2010s are just baffling.
I have this problem with my brain in that, and I've been noticing this more and more, especially in the COVID bub that we're all in. My memory sucks. Like, I can barely remember. I mean, okay, everyone's memory is kind of faulty, but I have experience. I have trouble recalling experiences in context. And to your point, you tell me what happened. I know exactly how it felt when Dirk won that championship, but like, a lot of that felt like 10 minutes ago, and this is not new stuff. I think everyone kind of feels this, but I recall my experiences of eating, to your point, like eating McDonald's when I was 5 so vividly that the years in between just make no sense to me. And I've been trying to figure this out for the last few years. Does this make sense?
That's probably why people on their deathbed always are talking about like their childhood.
Yeah.
Everything else is just a blur.
Did you watch the Charlie Kaufman movie that's on Netflix now? I'm Thinking of Ending Things, it's called. It's a bright story, as you can imagine by the title.
I have not watched it yet. I do like Charlie Kaufman. I think I've seen almost everything else he's like written or directed. I have not watched this yet because it seems like a bummer.
It's very, very sad, man. But it's cool because he's such a cool artist and thinker. But this is related to this conversation. Things, no spoilers, things seem Kaufman-like, and then they kind of slowly deteriorate, and you have to figure out what's part of the story and what part of it is him fucking with you. It's interesting.
Adaptation was like that too. I did like Anomalisa, but I felt at the same time he was so trying to be heartbreaking. It felt like he was just there, like trying to like jab you with like a dart of heartbreakingness. Oh, did that break you? Okay, let's make it even more crushing. How about that one? Did that one break you? Okay, all right. She's gonna be a middle management woman from Cleveland.
Yeah.
Well, just a working class Joe. No, that didn't break your heart. Okay.
Yeah.
But he is really smart and talented.
To that point, I feel like we accept that vibe in music and artwork and contemporary artwork. There are certain like painters or songwriters, Bon Iver, who just one song after another is just like, this one's gonna bum you out. But in movies, it's so populist, like we kind of don't accept that. In a way, not to foreshadow our conversation, in a way we talk about Paul George. It's like not on our watch. You can't be sad on and ruin it for us here, where we accept it in other forms. Writers, poets.
Right. I mean, without diving into basketball, there's a thin line between scorn, mockery, loserdom, and tragedy. Like, they
Yeah.
all kind of
Yeah.
are bundled together.
Right. It's like being sad, dehydrated, tired, or like depressed. You know, it's like kind of all the same thing.
Either way, you're lying in bed.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Right.
However
Or
you
what?
got there or why you got there, we don't know. But you're in bed. The shades are drawn. It's 4 in the afternoon.
You're staring at candles. The Knicks are on TV. You're wearing a Shumpert jersey.
I don't know what happened. I'm just here. All I remember is my childhood. I like the Knicks, and
Am
here I
I?
am on
am
my
I-
deathbed.
Yeah. Am I depressed or a Knicks fan?
No one knows.
No. It
No,
will
no
never
one.
be.
No one
Yeah.
will ever know.
To be continued forever.
I gotta say, man, when I walked out of the house yesterday, it was a little chilly in the morning for the first time in a while. And at first I was pleased because I thought of all the drip that I could wear.
I was not expecting that. I'm sorry. Go on.
Well, you should have. The closet full of drip. All the jackets, light jackets, sweaters, long sleeved items
Oh,
that,
yeah.
that
it's
have been
on.
hiding out for 6 months
Yeah.
can now be brought out. And that was, enchanting because we were in hiding for like April and May. So there wasn't even sort of a long sleeve season. We just went from winter shit to summer stuff. So I was like, oh yeah, I've got these jackets that I like. I can wear my drip. Then I went over and got a coffee. And as I was sitting down to drink my coffee outside, I caught a wave of dread. It was a dread wave. And
Dread.
it was a wave. It was a wave of dread. And I think it's COVID dread. But it was everything, right? It was just sort of this, like, the coldness of the morning, that winter is on the way, that plants and flowers are going to die, that the days are getting shorter, and that we're going back inside with COVID still nipping at our heels. Didn't feel great. Just gonna say, man. Well, it was not a great feeling, and it was temporary. Had my coffee. Thought about my drip again. Recovered. But I definitely caught some dread.
This is kind of what I was talking about with, like, my brain is broken because it felt like a week ago we had back sweat going on. We had like the short pants, the short sleeves, the New York City's like film of summer, and now I can't imagine it because now we are to the part of the year where it feels like work is beginning, things are resuming, the fun has ended. You're back from the August vibe. But as I got older, I really kind of learned to embrace it, man. I don't know. Embrace is the wrong word. I love it.
Well, we spoke a lot last week about restaurants and COVID and sort of the predicament that these industries are in, trying to balance survival and safety.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of hit me a little bit in my dread wave, where I was like, you know what? Right now this is as good as it gets, COVID-wise, in New York City. No one really has it. It's not around that much. Everything is outside. You can still go out for dinner. You can have drinks with your friends. You can more or less live normally outside. And you don't really have to worry about people having COVID for the most part, because it's just low percentage in the population. But in order to have some of these same experiences in coming months, we're going to have to be indoors, which will bring COVID back. And just that dynamic of, in order to see our friends and have meals publicly, we're going to have to jeopardize safety of ourselves and others. Man, that sucks. Like that's a no-win right there.
I know.
So that was part of the dread.
We always talk about choices, about thinking about COVID, and I just have to choose for just self-preservation. I have to choose the idea that we're getting closer to this president getting out of here. I just have to think that. And we just have to assume the vaccine is one day closer. Just sustain until we can get to the point where things start happening. Help comes. And it's just time going by, maybe. That is all I'm hoping for. But I hear you, man. There's a threat a little bit out there with the cold temperatures, but I think we can do this, and we have no other. There's no other way to think about it, you know.
Yeah, there was an article in the Times about Europe's approach, which is kind of the one that I agree with.
What part of Europe?
I think the article focused on France, which is having a resurgence. But they were talking about Europe in general, just sort of saying, all right, look, we're going to wear masks in public. We're going to close, you're not going to have people in bars standing up. It's going to be all seated. So there's a less sort of spray range, I guess.
Helps.
If that
it
helps.
Yeah.
But it's more like this is how we're going to have to live. And I do agree with that. I think you can disappear and vanish and hope this thing goes away, and then you can suddenly resume your life, or you can try to live with this bullshit. And I'm on the page of make the best of it, because we do not know when this is going to go away. This might be the rest of our lives. We just don't know. So I'm like, try to be safe. Don't give up being human.
I think it's safe to say we will always have to or think about or see someone wearing a mask for the rest of our lives. But we hear all these stories about what science, how to frame the vaccine, right? And the latest report this week that had people kind of worried, rightfully so, was we're not going to see enough doses to immunize the world until 2024. But of course, right? It's impossible to fully immunize the world that quickly in a year, in 2021 or 2022. And we knew this, but we just got to keep our heads on straight, and at every situation look for a leader, and at every situation kind of don't be dumb, which is a hard task. I am more dumb than I am smart, maybe like 90-10, 80-20 maybe. So I know myself, but the smartest thing I can do is to be overly cautious, because if I give up a little, I'm stupid.
Yeah, no, I get it. And we've always talked about, people basically being on their own timeline here. Mm-hmm. But I'm pretty much resigned to this is going to be the immediate future for the world. And I don't think this is even a pessimistic way of looking at it. It's more of like, let's be optimistic. Like, this is how it's going to be. So how do we make life good? How do we live as joyfully as possible, considering the hazard that still exists? And how do we live as joyfully as possible without endangering ourselves and others? And we just got to have to figure out a little bit of a balance there. So
yeah.
I don't know, man. Again, I don't think that's really a negative way of looking at it, though.
No, and I feel what is really helpful for me is opting out of stuff. For example, I don't really care about the White House day to day. Overarching, I care very much. I don't care about someone being hypocritical from politics, because I assume they all are. It's just politics, right? And I'm especially appreciative of something like the NBA bubble, because it's been part of our lives now for months, and we argue over these games, and these games have finally started heating up. And I had to pull back last night and be like, yo, shout out to these guys for doing this, man. It's a damn Charlie Kaufman movie in there.
Yeah, I think we've been pretty consistent with our praise of the players and our skepticism towards the NBA. Mm-hmm. And I think that is accurate. I think that is the best possible approach. And that was justified, in my opinion, last week when there was an article in the Times about how business leaders in New York had wrote this article. It was an essay, open letter to Bill de Blasio.
Oh, your boy, BDB.
my guy. And
BD,
in it,
yeah.
they had expressed their reservations about the current state of New York City and how terrifying and crime-ridden, and the perception was that it was this hellhole and it was not good for business, and that they wanted law and order, which to me is a pretty direct request for, like, crack some heads. Get the cops out there and crack some heads. They didn't say tax us more, give us more, let's put more money towards social services. No, they said we want law and order. And they believe that getting rid of things like vandalism or the homeless will lead to people being more eager to come back and work in offices. One of the organizations that signed that was the NBA. You've got a bubble, you've got signs that say Black Lives Matter everywhere. A selling point of this was the visibility of social justice on a grand scale. And meanwhile, you're telling Bill de Blasio that you want the cops to be more active and more aggressive in going after people in New York City. Doesn't sit quite right with me, man.
This is another example of something I've chosen to opt out of, but I think I've viewed it as something that was probably lost in translation. Like, hey, NBA person, not anybody of very much importance, like the owner or the commissioner, will you co-sign this thing supporting New York City? It's like, absolutely. What did it say? It's like, oh, well, that contradicts something we've said before. So I just can't, I can't get my head in there because it's too noisy.
I mean, all I know is that they signed that letter. I don't know what the conversation was. I don't know the dynamic of who said, yes, we will co-sign that. And someone later said, dude, what are you doing? That's a bad idea. I don't know. I know they were on that letter.
Just ignore the letter. Like, I just don't care about that letter. It gets in the way of real things. Like, I just don't care about that op-ed. Do you know what I mean?
Well, fortunately, de Blasio, pushed back and was like, well, then why don't you call all of your, political favors in and get more money sent to New York City? And thankfully he pushed back. But what if de Blasio said, okay, I hear you. Let's ramp up the police force around the city. Let's crack some skulls. Let's get out there and arrest homeless people. Let's get these vandals. Let's increase police presence in neighborhoods with black people. That directly could have contributed to the exact type of situations that the bubble is supposed to be raising awareness against.
Yeah. I was really mad. I was peak mad at de Blasio, your boy de Blasio, and your guy Cuomo. Maybe
My guys, the lads.
Like 3 weeks ago, I was peak mad because we were seeing all of our favorite restaurants and shops kind of struggle. And then I went in and started watching all of their press conferences every day on New York One and, reading more, just doing more. And I'm still extremely frustrated, but less about them and more about the world and our federal government. They are in a kind of a lose-lose situation as well. They're struggling. And I watch de Blasio every day talk for an hour or so. And
oh my God.
I want to know. This stuff matters to me, right? Like his policy affects like my favorite bar. So I want to know what he's thinking.
Well, we're not calling him my man anymore. It's clear whose man's that is.
Well, to finish my point,
sorry.
This is all so complicated that I'm almost out of my element here. Almost. I'm very much out of my element. Just to say, like, give someone more money, it sounds simple. I mean, I think taxing rich people is very simple. We should just do that. But give more money to my favorite bar is simple to me. But when I hear him talk, I know what he's dealing with more. And I'm like, holy shit, this is a fucking mess.
Well, speaking of topics in which you are out of your element, why don't we talk about hoops a little bit?
What's that? You mean I'm gonna
Sorry.
I'm gonna light a candle.
I apologize. I apologize.
I'm going to
So-
put on my Shumpert jersey.
Thank you. Sorry, that was uncalled for. Look, there's a huge story, and it involves basketball. We are deep in the playoffs. Let's talk about what everyone wants to hear about. R.J. Barrett snubbed from the rookie teams. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's trending everywhere. No, everyone's talking about this. The Knicks' number 3 overall pick, the savior, didn't make the first or second All NBA rookie team, and of course, people are making the mistake. He's not in the NBA. He doesn't play in the NBA. But if he did, and you compared him to players that actually played in the NBA, of course he's not on those 2 teams.
I mean, after that news broke, every basketball group chat I'm on was on fire all night.
It was
You
heater.
saw Twitter; it was like this infinity scroll, just R.J. Barrett takes left and right. People were saying this is one of the best nights of basketball ever, as far as Twitter goes, memes, everything, all about R.J. Barrett.
Your T-Mobile Sidekick burst into flames. Your blue and orange T-Mobile Sidekick was just out of batteries.
I was
in
just
5
there
minutes.
with my Wendy's Inspector Deck Biggie Fries pack.
Inspector Deck. Wow, I was not expecting that one.
Well, yeah, because he refused to deal with Wendy's for years. All right, so yeah, Barrett. Sorry, man. Tough break. Get him next year, kid.
He's
Get
really
back in that, get in that league.
also, Cam Reddish didn't make the either team. There were some bad rookies this year. My guy, Nikhil Alexander Walker, I don't think made either team. These are all very promising players.
You know what? I'm gonna just cut you off. I know you've good takes here. I was doing it for an RJ Barrett joke. Let's just move on. Okay? I know
You hate rookies. I know. You hate the draft and you hate rookies.
I like vets.
Yeah, I know. You Paul Millsap is your guy.
Unless you're gonna talk about Taj, then I'm ready to move on. Also, though, shout out to Taj Gibson, who constructed a new court over by the
wow.
Ingersoll houses. It's beautiful.
Wow.
It's awesome. Beautiful court.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
That's where he's
man.
from, Fort Greene.
Yep.
Brooklyn's own Taj Gibson. A true garden protector in every sense.
One Taj away.
Okay, so real basketball talk now. Clippers, Nuggets, Game 7 occurred last night.
Burner.
The Clippers were favored, but we're
Should
talking
they-
about
Should they have been?
their favorite. Their record was a few games better, and that was with guys like Paul George and Kawhi missing some time. But again, this was not a 1-8 matchup. This was, I want to say, what, 2-5? Right?
I believe
Something
it
like
was
that?
tighter than that. I want to say it was a 2-3, but
2-3. You're right. It was a 2-3. Clippers were 49-23, and Denver was 46-27. So, anyway, the Clippers were one of the prohibitive favorites, if not the favorite in many people's eyes. Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, 2 fantastic players. They also have a wealth of solid role players on that team, including one of the Morai, a
Which
face
one?
puncher.
Which
no
one?
one will ever know.
I was hoping, but
But they had a squad that was considered a favorite in many people's eyes to win the title. And they lost in humiliating fashion.
very
They were
much
down
so.
20 with like 2 minutes to go. Maybe they lost by 12, but it was a laugher. They pulled their starters, or at least their stars, with 2 minutes to go. It was a wrap.
Jokic was pulling some Globetrotter stuff at the end.
King.
He's the best.
I'm trying to think, where do you start with this? How big of an embarrassment is this for the Clippers? People were really gleeful about this loss.
I, not surprisingly and annoyingly as always, thought they had nothing to hang their heads about because the Nuggets are so good. They lost to Nikola Jokic and Murray, who's having a great run in the bub. They lost to the better team, man, and they got crushed. And it was a little jarring, very jarring to see Kawhi Leonard, who has had so much success in the playoffs in the last few years in his career, go down like that because the Clippers have the stars and the names. Montrezl Harrell is even someone people love. Patrick Beverly. This team was supposed to win. But then you look at the Nuggets, I'm like, that's a better team, man. And especially in the bubble. So I thought the ire or the dragging that the Clippers were taking on social media was just like Lakers fans singing a tune because there is no Nuggets Twitter, but there is Lakers Twitter, and that's what we saw.
I think that's accurate. But in my opinion, there was something distinctly unlikable about the Clippers. And it was the personalities on the team and the way that they played. Both to me were fairly unappealing. And I like a lot of these guys individually. I don't mind the Morai, whichever one it is. Patrick Beverly is entertaining to me. I think he's good. Obviously, Paul George and Kawhi are good.
Lou Williams is a king.
I like all these guys. But as a collective, there was something kind of distasteful about them. That they were mean is not the right word. Because you can be cool and mean. There was something just sort of detestable about them as a team. They were sour.
I was hoping you would go into the Kendrick Perkins BMM mode of all bark, no bite.
No, they were really good. I'm not here to sit here and talk about how they humiliated themselves. They lost to a team that balled out in 7 games.
With a unique player who was going off. Jokic.
Also, back to your thing, styles make fights. Mm-hmm. They had no answer for Jokic whatsoever. No. They had none. That's just how their team was assembled. Mm-hmm. They don't have an elite defensive big. Trez is undersized, and Zubek is a young guy who's not that great. Mm-hmm. They just had no answer for him. And Jokic, is maybe the best offensive center in history. I know that's a large claim, literally and figuratively, but I think there's an argument that he's the best offensive center in history.
I would like to say it as he's a top 10 point guard in history.
But, they did not have a way to defend him without sending help. And when they sent help, Jokic is the best passing big man of all time.
And can I just support you here before you go on to support that claim, which may sound wild? His box plus minus 2, the BMM version, is ridiculous. Just rattling off some numbers: 4.9, 7.2, 2.9, 3.1. Offensively, 3.0, 5.6. He is up there with the greats of all, and he's sustained excellence for years. So this is not hyperbole. He's proved this over and over.
I'm not just making that up.
Yeah.
I've gone through and looked at all the numbers of the other people you would compare him to. And again, I'm only talking about offense. Akeem, Kareem, Shaq, David Robinson. Mm-hmm. It's them.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
Wilt, but I mean that's them. That's the group, right? So in terms of guys, even in the modern NBA, let's just leave like Wilt Chamberlain out of it.
Well, he never played in the NBA. So.
That's what I'm saying. The NBA started in 1996,
right.
But those guys are legends. This is not knocking them. But Jokic is obviously a better shooter than all of them. Mm-hmm. That goes without saying, because we know this. They couldn't shoot. So Jokic is the best shooter, and he's the best passer. Mm-hmm. And when you look at numbers per 36, because guys like Shaq played a ton of minutes, so you look at their per game, they just crush someone like Jokic. Mm-hmm. But per 36, because the sport was different, his points, his offensive rebounds are pretty close. His efficiency is right there. I know he wasn't a phenomenon in the way that Shaq was, where he just got 4 people around him and dunked on their heads, or a master craftsman like Akeem Olajuwon. But the numbers are the numbers, and you look at it and you're like, well, look, his numbers stack up, plus he was the best shooter and he's the best passer. There's an argument there that I think is reasonable. Whether you agree with it or not, whatever. But anyway, he's a beast. They had no one to stop him, and he sliced their defense to ribbons when they tried to double team. And for a team that was as good defensively as the Clippers, top 5 all season, to see them get manhandled like that, Denver was just taking wide open threes all game.
Yeah, and
all game. They just happened to miss them in the first half.
before the nerds get on me, I was reading Paul George's stats, which are incredible. Jokic's are even better. We're talking 6.9, 9.1, 7.4. But to your point, Jokic was dismantling them in so many different ways, and he was seeing the court in a basketball genius way that I felt like Kawhi is young. Paul George is still pretty young.
Jokic is young.
Yes, but what I mean is there a complacency is this the curse of the super team?
Complacency.
I know it sounds like wanting it more, but
It's pretty damn close, Mr. Andrew Crow.
so what I'm saying is when you hear Doc Rivers talk about it after going down big, all he says is we got to play better. And I know he's not going to go through strategy, but it never seems like they identified the thing. They're always like, well, Kawhi's got to start going off, which is kind of true. But I was just watching this play out, and they were just missing jump shots. And I'm like, there is no plan here. The plan is for talent to take over, and it never did. Like the coin never flipped their direction.
There was a stretch there during the fourth quarter where Jokic was sitting out. It was a fairly close game. Denver was up by a little bit. And the Clippers went cold. I think they went, 8, 9 minutes without a field goal. Maybe it was 6. I don't know. It felt like an eternity. They could not make a shot. And you saw the panic starting to set in. And Paul George missed 2 or 3 shots during that stretch really badly.
He hit the backboard on a corner 3, which
And
Damian
another one
Lillard
just
loved.
grazed the undercarriage of the rim. Mm-hmm. Really, really, you saw it falling apart, and they knew it, and they were panicking. But yeah, they missed a couple layups in that mix. If they had shot okay, and they'd sort of held down the fort during that period where Jokic was sitting, they might have had a chance to win that game.
Yeah.
But they went cold at a really bad time.
Yeah.
When they needed to gain ground with a basketball genius on the bench. And that was it. That was their season.
Yeah, it was the opposite of momentum. And I don't know, man, it wasn't quite the coin flip that I love to talk about. It was kind of everything went wrong. When things in your life or your day go wrong in succession, it feels like a snowball effect, but it's just all these things coming up the bad hands in a poker table. And they should run it back, and they should bring Doc Rivers back. And I think that team still competes for a championship as long as they're together.
I absolutely think so.
Yep.
Maybe they could use someone like Al Horford, perhaps. Trade Paul George for Horford, get yourself a vet, someone who can hold down the paint.
Yeah, all they have to do is swap out Paul George for R.J. Barrett, and they're good to go.
One thing that I don't like about the Clippers stylistically is that they don't have good passers. Everyone is very ISO. And that doesn't mean they're bad passers. I think Paul George and Kawhi, especially this year, are totally capable. But they're score-first guys, and so is Lou Williams.
I'm okay with that, though. They were good enough. It just didn't work out for them. I know what you mean, though. Yeah.
I agree. I'm talking aesthetics. Mm-hmm. I never enjoyed them as a team because it was based on whoever has the ball, try to score. Oh. If they double team that guy, kick it out and do it again. It just doesn't have a lot of the sort of, grace that you extend to teams that are really good and really scary. Yeah. That you don't have LeBron, you don't have Jokic, you don't have a Ben Simmons. Mm-hmm. And I just mean there's not that sort of passing IQ guy in that mix that makes them a little bit unappealing to me. And Doncic, Harden, I'm not extending it only to those dudes. Draymond Green, there was just an absence of kind of beauty and intellect from a masterful passer, Chris Paul, orchestrating, the planets that rotate
Frank
around
Ntilikina.
them.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm so bullish on a player like LaMelo Ball. And I know every player has their weaknesses, because if they didn't, they'd all be LeBron James. But collecting players who know how to pass is always a good idea, even though they have weaknesses. And it feels like Ballmer collected a lot of players who are so excellent at so many things, and it's like too big to fail, right? Like he runs a company that operates on this principle, or he ran a company that operates on the principle. He still does, I think. But it is this. This is a stretch, but it is this corporate, huge S&P mentality where it's like, we have the dominant components here to win, and he does, and he did. But he was missing maybe this aesthetic part that translates into a better team, which is a player like someone who can pass. And I don't think he really targeted that by the proof of the roster. There's no one on that roster who really scratches that itch. And I don't know if it came out.
One Joe Ingles away.
Literally, though, right?
I mean, I'm bringing him up because they cut Joe Ingles.
Oh, I forgot.
I mean, several years ago before he went to Utah and then signed a deal with them. This is kind of ancient history, basketball speaking wise. But one Joe Ingles in that mix, a guy whose job is just to find someone else. That would have been nice to have.
And I don't think this was a Clippers problem until they lost. If the Clippers went to the finals and beat whoever came out of the East, we'd be like, yeah, they put together the best team. They're unbeatable.
Yeah, I think it's an aesthetic issue that's easy to point at as a reason they lost, but might only be part of the reason they lost. They could have won without it.
I agree.
They could have won with just ISO guys because they're really good.
I want to bring up this point about people dragging Paul George. He told us as recently as like a few weeks ago that he was not feeling well. Something was wrong in his head, and he was asking for help from his most immediate circle. I thought we were doing the mental health awareness thing, and I thought we were taking that very seriously. And then when he goes out on the court in a Game 7 and looks like he's languishing and just kind of chucking up shots that hit the backboard, I'm like, oh, he's not 100%. Like, he told us so. And I think I went back and looked at his career. It's hard to find a flaw with that player. He is not the best player in the NBA, but his game is pretty flawless. He does everything very well. And he suffered an injury, and it wasn't a knee injury or a back injury, which we would forgive. Like, well, his back was messed up. Obviously, he wasn't 100%. I don't know. The culture hasn't shifted yet, is maybe my point.
I mean, I have mixed feelings about this, and that's not without sympathy for him and the situation of the bubble, because I have sympathy with all those guys. When we spoke specifically about this, how tough that situation is and how kind of gross it is. I just don't know the connection between that and your performance on the court. I think it's worth considering because he said, this is how I feel.
After having a bad game, right? He's like, I am not well.
But it's also, are you playing poorly, which magnifies how lame the bubble is, as opposed to, say, Jamal Murray, who's like buoyed by good play despite the bubble. Like, oh, I feel great because I'm balling out. Is Paul George like, shit, I've been like bricking shots, really annoying, and it just makes the fact that I'm in this bubble even worse. Like, there's a dovetailing effect there potentially too. I'm not accusing him of not being affected by the bubble, because how could you not be down there? It's just hard to know. Did he come out and shoot poorly from three because he's unhappy and just wants to go home? Like, maybe. It's possible.
Well, this goes way back to Poogate. Like, we thought Paul Pierce was this soldier who came back from a catastrophic injury in that game to play. But it turns out he just had to go to the bathroom. And, like, these are details we'll never know. It's like, oh, was he shooting poorly before that? I don't know how he was shooting, but he had a turtle head. So was he, like, second-guessing his shot selection? Like, we'll never know, right? All we know is what Paul George has told us. And knowing that, I was like, all I can say is he's not right, because he told us he's not right.
Yeah, when people say this is puts the Clippers' future in jeopardy. Like, no, it doesn't. They got to come back and do the exact same thing. They traded all their future picks. They were the second best team in the West. They probably, I don't know, they might have been able to beat the Lakers, maybe.
Yeah.
Like to me,
I think so.
Absolutely, you try to improve marginally where you can, and you come back and you try to win a title next year.
And it brings up, we took a break from this story, but it's coming up again. Kawhi Leonard as the Grim Reaper, because the Clippers are in kind of a perilous situation if and when he leaves, because they gave up so many picks and so many assets to get these two guys. It's amazing.
And he has an out after next year, which is amazing. That he signed, for all purposes, a 2-year contract after all that Machiavellian machinations. Beautiful, beautiful Shiva, destroyer of worlds activity.
It's incredible. It's some superhero eater of world shit, right? This is some Thanos stuff. He just goes from planet to planet and destroys everything. You know, he also gives Toronto and San Antonio a lot of joy. But man, he's amazing. I'm a huge Kawhi Leonard fan, man.
But right, so we're roasting Kawhi Leonard, who is a 2-time Finals MVP, for going 6 of 22. Well, man, this is how basketball works.
Yeah.
It's odd to see former athletes reveling in this kind of bullshit, because this is the sport.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't have it. Some nights you can't hit the side of a barn.
Some months you don't have it.
Yeah, like, wow, Kawhi sucks. Dude, what are you talking about? We just saw this guy win a championship. We just saw him hit a game-winning shot against Philly, although he did take 40 shots that game.
Well, it's like clip's gonna clip. True, but against Jokic, who I think is a Hall of Famer, Jamal Murray, who probably is an all-star at this point, like, that's a very... And your boy Paul Millsap, who decides to do something. Gary Harris, who's healthy. Like, yeah, that team is very hard to beat, man.
Very good. Jeremy Grant was a great acquisition as a mini Giannis, kind of rim protector, who also shoots pretty well from 3. I like the Nuggets a lot. Jamal Murray is a weird player to me, because I don't even think he's in the upper half of point guards, but he's had a great run. And he's kind of has this, like, sloppy style to him.
Yeah, he's reckless.
Where he'll take bad shots, but he can make some of them. And he's really skilled, but then he'll throw the pass over someone's head.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't love him as a player, but, you know, he's put up some really incredible stat lines and hit some huge shots in the bubble and in the postseason. So, you know, maybe he's taking some sort of leap. Maybe he's just feeling it. But, you know, we also don't really remember those games when he goes 5 of 19 with like 4 turnovers. We just kind of pass those aside and be like, Murray for 50, oh my God.
The Rondo Hall of Fame discussion stopped when he stopped having good games. But a lot of people are saying that... I sound like such a jerk, a lot of people. I've heard... still. Is chaos to blame for this, or are these just great teams winning? The Nuggets are good, right? People are saying that this is the chaos of the bubble. I don't quite buy that.
I'm going to take this and shift it over to the other series, because I think this is a better example of chaos.
That was my transition, baby.
Well, it's well done. You've been throwing lobs like Jokic behind the bed.
Oh,
behind
thank you.
Head,
Thank you. That's
flips.
very high praise. Cool.
Incredible praise.
Yeah.
Heat Celtics is weird, man.
Chaos.
It's chaos. Neither of these teams has like a top 15 player. They have good guys. They don't have a top 15 player for the first time in like ages. You know, look at the East.
Bam Adebayo's close.
I mean, Jimmy Butler's close.
Yep.
For sure. I mean, he can do that, but like, I don't know. I don't know if there's a top 15 player in this series, which is surreal because last year we lost LeBron, who had dominated the conference for 15 years.
Yeah.
And Kawhi stepped in. So for the last decade and a half, arguably the best player in the NBA has come out of the East. Arguable every single season. And then all of a sudden we have these two teams they're good. They're very good teams. They're good on both sides of the ball. They have a lot of talented dudes. They're deep. Good teams. but they just don't feel like championship
matchup is
contenders
fun.
to me
Yeah.
at all. I don't look at them and be like, wow, they've got blank. These guys are good. They're not like scintillating. They don't have a Jokic. They don't have a LeBron. They don't have a Kawhi. You're just sort of like,
before we
it's chaos.
before we crown Kawhi as who he is now, this is how I felt about the last finals. The Raptors are really good. I mean, Kawhi's different now because he won that series. But the Warriors were just going to handle them. And then injury happens, and then chaos happens, and then one by one, all these things happen, and then Kawhi gets the trophy, and Lowry
sure.
is the superstar, right?
Well, I disagree with that. I think Lowry's awesome. I'm just saying, Kawhi had already established himself as one of the best players in basketball. People were already talking about him being a top 5 player. He'd already won a Finals MVP with the Spurs. You know, I agree with you 100% that in a universe where Golden State was healthy, they destroy Toronto. Mm-hmm. If you had Durant and Clay that whole series, they rock them.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
But that doesn't change the fact that, you know, Kawhi came out of the East being Kawhi Leonard. He was not a fringy all-star who stepped up. He was Kawhi fucking Leonard.
Well, he was always who he is, but I mean, you know, winning a championship with a second team kind of elevates your it kind of levels you up. But he's been the same player the whole time.
That's all I'm saying is he was already a top 5 guy.
Yeah. This is
when that
perception,
happened.
right?
So that's kind of what I'm talking about with Heat Celtics. A lot of good players, good squads, but they kind of feel like gatekeeper teams.
Yeah,
Teams that like LeBron would just sort of stomp through and be like, damn, LeBron does it again. That was a good challenge to him.
They're not final bosses. They're
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. But one of them's going to go to the finals.
Yeah, I mean, what a game, man. Like, I enjoyed that game and I enjoyed that result. But it's getting hot. It's getting hot in the bub, man. That Bam Adebayo block was kind of the icing on the Jimmy Butler alpha game, right?
Yeah, that was a fantastic game. As jarring as the experience seems to watch a bunch of, marginal all-stars going at it. I mean, like literally, people think I'm like talking shit. There's some like several time all-stars on the court.
It's not what you expect from a conference finals at
No,
all.
but they are really good teams, and they are well designed. They're well coached. They're disciplined. They play smart basketball. Like as a team, they're very cool. They just feel like teams that get dispatched by like the god who comes down and just like, waves his hand and dispatches like the best of man's intentions.
The bub god, I like this.
That's what I mean. Like Jokic, bub god came through.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, there's no bub god in that series.
No, and I know we're gonna try to manufacture one out of it, but
I wonder who it'll be.
It didn't quite work out for him in game one, though.
Yeah, I mean, respect to the Boston Beantown Mafia from the media. Imagine how gleeful they were when the Clippers lost. Like that was the greatest moment for them, and I think that was part of the reason there was such a hubbub after that game. Anything to talk about Jason Tatum, anything to talk about except Jason Tatum single-handedly blowing that game.
Yeah, it
Missed
was
his last 7 shots, took ones that were terrible, had 2 bad fouls, had a turnover. Like he stunk. If that was anyone else, we would have heard so much about it. You saw the jubilation on the faces of like Boston people when the Clippers went down. It was like, thank God we have new goats to roast.
Yeah. I know. And like the BMM is so shifty that they even featured Jason Tatum's wonderful son and did not comment on how mean he was naming his son Deuce after Paul Pierce. This is foul, man.
Cruel.
Yeah. You don't do that, man.
Anyway, that was an awesome game, though. I think it'll be a good series. I don't know. I love Jimmy Butler as a character, as a player. He's a basketball genius. I think he's super, super fun to watch. And he's unconventional. He doesn't necessarily throw behind-the-back passes. He doesn't have this sort of masterful handle, but he's like an incredibly good cutter. He takes great control, great care of the ball in the half court. He's really opportunistic defensively. Butler's just an awesome player.
Yeah, even with his awkward shooting this year, this is where I turn into my boomer self. Because did you see that clip of him mouthing the words like, "We got some motherfucking ballers on this team"? I told you. I love that so much. That was my gruel. I was like, I am a Jimmy Butler fan, man.
Love Jimmy Butler. Love him.
And I don't even want to I mean, we will get into the Sixers aspect of it because it was trending as this game was happening. But not to be all Last Dance about it, but I am a boomer right now. It's cool seeing players in the moment, and I think one of the attractive part of watching Butler play is his ability to perform in the moment. And I think we saw that last night. And Bam will come through. Bam's description of that block is awesome. When he was like, "It happened so fast, I don't even know what happened, but I did it." And I was like, that's incredible. It's what I want to hear athletes say. But Jimmy Butler did that 90s thing that was so satisfying, where he turned into the self-appointed alpha, hero ball, whatever you want to call it. But driving to the basket and try to draw a foul on a marginal defender, awesome. I just love that strategy.
I think there's something to be said for a greater understanding of the game that goes beyond what it's a guy shoot from three. Can they space the floor? Mm-hmm. You can find numbers to talk about what Jimmy Butler is good at. He's 95th percentile at cuts. The best in the league at cuts out of non-big men. Mm-hmm. And he's actually better than them. They just count them statistically as cuts when they roll to the basket after pick and roll. But in terms of guys who actually cut, Jimmy's the best in the league. So you can find these, his assist to turnover ratio for part of the year with Philly last year, 6-1 for a couple months, or at least a month or so. You can look at the numbers, you can find them. It's not about what does he shoot from three. That matters.
I mean, it's
about basketball, man. It's about looking at the game and knowing what you're looking at. And then going in and looking at the numbers and finding out what someone's good at. It's not about the eye test versus numbers. It's just about not being myopic and saying, well, this guy can't shoot threes. So, whatever, he's a bad shooter. Well, he can do other shit.
Yeah, I agree. We talked about it last week, as me and you are clearly Miami day oneers. And
Ronnie Cycli, baby.
Yeah, we
Sherman Douglas.
Yeah, season ticket holders since the early 70s, man. So it's easy to root for this team because we are this team. We did it. Congratulations, Ben.
Andrew, I'm really proud of what you brought to the table as a fellow day oneer.
Yeah. But this is a very charming team. The Duncan Robinson having imposter syndrome is hilarious. This is all hilarious stuff, man. And Tyler Herro turning into an entertaining personality and kind of cool player. This is very fun.
Better sort of creative abilities off the dribble. He had a really difficult finish on a Euro step that was really filthy.
With his left, right?
Yeah, as a Euro step aficionado.
Yeah.
Who's literally been practicing my Euros.
How's it going? Good. You got the chair set up with your enemies' printout faces taped on them.
I can't really get that much distance. It's more of a idea. It's more theoretical than getting around a chair. But the move he did, where you're driving to the left side of the basket, your first step with the right leg is inside, and then you're bouncing back out to the left. Mm-hmm. Typically, you try to finish that with your interior hand, your right, which is your strong arm.
But there was shot contention there.
Him finishing with the left and almost with a looping hook shot, even if he's left-handed, which he might be, I don't even know. That is an incredibly hard finish. Yeah. Incredibly hard to be going at that speed, moving away from the basket and use your outside hand to put the ball up, no matter whether it's your strong hand or not. Incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult to finish. And he also had a nice move where he drove into the lane coming from the right side, kind of got in the air, twisted halfway, pivoted, and kicked the ball out for a three to, I want to say Crowder maybe. But like, difficult shot making, difficult pass making, and an utterly hilarious character to begin with. So,
Yeah.
Harrowball, I'm in.
Yeah, he had an outlet pass on a fast break that was especially beautiful. I believe to Jay Crowder, I forget. But I'm just waiting for his bars to drop, which probably will happen after the Heat win the sweep their way through the NBA Finals. Harrowball.
Does he have bars?
He must. He must. I mean, it's not like someone at his age and as culturally advanced as he is. I think it's not a question of does he have bars, it's what kind of bars.
How good are his bars?
Are they bars for you or someone else? I don't know.
Yeah, again, maybe he's a lefty. I'm not totally sure. But anyway, that was a really hard shot.
Yes, I mean, and we're gonna see Duncan Robinson do his thing. He's gonna hit like 4 threes one game, and then we're gonna see Kemba Walker wake up a little bit. But this is like we've seen this Kemba Walker in Charlotte, which is a bummer. So I hope he figures that out. But what a game, man!
At least he's not a team cancer like Kyrie.
Yeah, at least I don't even know where to start with this, man. At least he needs to find some of that Isaiah Thomas energy, being in the moment, loyalty maybe, not abandoning his team like he did in Charlotte.
Yeah, you can't quit on the Celtics unless you go to Brooklyn. Then it's fine. One thing that I've noticed in these playoffs, and I want to give a mild apology of sorts to Klay Thompson. Mild. And that I think he's still overrated. But there are not many guys who have real, actual gravity that are not specialists. Because if there's one thing that's been a constant throughout this entire playoffs, is that teams will abandon almost anyone on the perimeter.
That's happening. It's a movement.
Yeah, and they'll just let him shoot. And Paul George let him shoot. And these are good shooters.
Sticking it to the nerds. Yeah.
Teams are willing to live with guys just taking open threes all game instead of letting someone get to the basket. And Klay Thompson is one of the rare guys, like a Kyle Korver or a JJ Redick, that people don't leave. And he can defend. There are just not many guys who fit that exact prototype of guys who are so good, like Duncan Robinson, that you can't leave them alone, and you won't leave them alone unless it is just absolutely necessary to save a layup, but aren't liabilities on defense. And Klay does fit that category. And I couldn't think of too many other guys that fit that as like off-ball spacing threats who can also defend that don't get abandoned a lot.
Yeah.
Like PJ Tucker, abandoned constantly. They let him shoot all the time.
Yeah. Like you never leave R.J. Barrett, Frank Ntilikina, or Keith Van Horn. So
Can't
those
do
are
it.
3 already.
Those are the first 3 that I came up with, but they're
Logical.
more superstars. So
All right,
I'm
right.
I'm kind of thinking of guys who aren't established goats.
True.
Anyway, there are not a lot. Not a lot.
No.
Other than the ones you just mentioned.
Yeah, and it's not even like an evolution or like a reaction to something. These guys just are the prototype of what we think the unicorn is more plentiful than this prototype, right? We see a lot of the players like Jokic kind of does exactly what we wanted Porzingis to do.
I mean, Luke Cornett, the god,
I like him.
basically fits those 2 criteria.
Yeah.
He's a shot blocker and he takes threes.
Yeah.
Brook Lopez, like Marc Gasol, defensive centers who can take threes are not an anomaly at this point.
Yeah. And
Serge Ibaka.
yeah. I mean, this is some weird height bias stuff, but Duncan Robinson has all these things working against him, which is, the way he looks, the Heat, being on the Heat, being so young, not being, battle proven. But he's going to emerge, I think, as a really key component in this playoffs. Well, yeah, let's say it takes 6 games for the Heat to sweep 2 teams. He's going to prove to be a huge factor there.
So he's a good example of someone who's different from Clay, though, because he is such a good shooter that you really can't leave him unless you're just compelled to by forces that you can't resist. Like, no one's ever going to help off of him. It's only like, oh shit, we're in transition and someone's driving in, I have to go. No one's going to leave him alone to like double team the post. Just won't happen. He's too good of a shooter. He shot like 45% from 3.
It's insane.
But
Yeah.
he's a liability on defense. Not horrible, but he's a liability. You can attack him over and over. And that's the one thing I will say. Clay can attack him on defense. He's solid on ball.
Yeah.
And there just aren't a lot of dudes who are that good of shooters because, you know, I think the evolution of spacing has been that the bell curve has kind of filled out. We know that most guys who are solid shooters will give you about that league average, 36, 37. On a nightly basis, okay, it goes between going 3 of 8 and 2 of 7 or something. Like,
Right.
whatever it is, you get it. You know the numbers. There aren't that many guys. Redick, Korver.
Korver still?
I'm saying off-ball guys who can really shoot. You just don't leave them. You can't do it. They're too good. You can't leave them ever. They may not be able to get a lot of shots off if you guard them, but there's only a handful of those guys who are just that good shooters. Bertans. Those guys you don't leave. It's impossible.
Yeah.
But none of them are good on defense.
I mean, would James Harden qualify? Harden's a unique player, though.
No, I'm saying Clay, Harden. I'm sorry, Curry, Harden, Lillard are different because they're on ball. I'm talking about guys who are primarily floor spacers.
Like Bojan Bogdanovic, one of the Bogdans, right?
Yeah, you probably would not leave him. He's deadly. But again, not a great defender.
Yep.
I don't know. I was just thinking about that. That's a very, very, very rare archetype. And like those are the only unitaskers who are left. Those guys who are so freaking good at shooting that you can't ever leave them. And there's like 7 in the entire NBA.
Big Joe Harris, the Sixers energy over here.
Joe Harris, he counts.
Yeah. Let's move on to the Sixers. You had some Sixers talk, man.
Sixers talk, eh?
Always down.
Well, first off, thanks for my boy Dave Early for having me on the Liberty Ballers podcast earlier this week.
Huge.
That was nice to be able to rant about the Sixers for a full hour. So if that's something that you'd be into, you can go and check that out. He came with a lot of my old tweets and asked me about them, which was pretty entertaining.
Receipts. Wow. That's what I'm going to start doing here. But like from not on the record. So keep your game up, Ben.
So yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I think we covered some interesting topics. So check that out if you need even more Sixers content than we typically provide. If you're that fucking nuts. So, Sixers news, other than the abject painfulness of watching Jimmy Butler versus the Celtics.
It's got to be joy at this point, right? The wound has healed. You just got to be joyful for this guy. He wanted to stay in Philly.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm rooting 100% for him.
Yeah.
Philly, whether or not he wanted to stay, Philly did not offer him a 4-year or 5-year contract. So, like, the impetus is on them. They did not offer that contract. If they had said, here's 5 years, Jimmy, we want you back, please come back. And he said, nah, I'm retiring to South Beach.
Del Boca Vista.
Then you could be annoyed at him.
Yeah.
But they didn't even offer him a contract. They did not do it.
I know
And
he
that's
said,
why Joel Embiid is clearly upset at the team and not Jimmy Butler. If Butler had abandoned him and said, I'm out,
right. Yeah,
he'd be mad at Jimmy. Instead, he's not. He's mad at the team. So you know what happened.
I'm only saying that because Jimmy has expressed publicly he loved playing with Joel. So that's all.
And also to that same conversation, I don't care who Ben Simmons liked playing with or who Brett Brown preferred, or I don't care about that little palace intrigue gossip. It's like they did not offer him a contract. Whatever their motivations, I don't care. Doesn't matter. They didn't offer him a contract. That's all that matters. But other Sixers news besides the, those conversations about Jimbo buckets.
James Butler.
I
Double
like that he's
Gavista.
like, it's not James. Brett Brown called him James, and he's like, nah, it's Jimmy.
I love him, man.
He's great. But so Sixers are rumored to be interested in former Rockets coach, former Phoenix coach, former Knicks coach, former Lakers coach, and
Pitbull.
god of modern offense, Mike D'Antoni.
Oh, it's not Mr. Worldwide? Okay, go on.
Thibs.
One Thibs away.
So, on one hand, the Sixers hiring Mike D'Antoni does not fit really with their roster, and it's also a bit of an indication of who's still running the organization, because he, of course, was the chosen guy for the Colangelos in Phoenix. Then they brought him to Philly to work under Brett Brown, which most people suspected was to replace him. So if he's hired by Philly, you might want to wonder who's actually still calling the shots. On the other hand, I love Mike D'Antoni, or D'Antoni as it's supposed to be pronounced. You know, the ultimate green light to my shooters.
Is Dan D'Antoni going to be the one pulling the strings behind the scenes? Dan?
Daniel Anthony D'Antoni.
He's the one really calling the shots over here.
Well, as a bit more of an outsider than myself, who's heavily vested in this Sixers business, how do you feel about D'Antoni, Dan, and Mike dealing with the current Philadelphia large lad roster?
It doesn't take much. He can do minor things to round out a roster in his favor. I mean, he transformed what James Harden is as a player. Not that there is a player like Harden here, but you joked on Twitter like more Furkan. I don't know, more Furkan. Add Joe Harris and you're cooking, right? I think adding the best coach of all time during his later end of his prime is always a good idea. You do that in a second. What, Ty Lue is going to be better than Mike D'Antoni? There's no way.
I don't think D'Antoni is a great fit for this particular team, but I also don't care.
But
I don't care because I don't think this team fits anything.
But he's a multitasker. Like, he's not one way. He figured out a Knicks roster to be a winner.
I agree with that. I'm also saying that, like, who cares about trying to figure out what to do with Tobias Harris and these guys?
Exactly.
I don't care.
Exactly.
I just don't care. I'm sick of watching stupid basketball. And that's not an insult to Brett Brown. Brett Brown, to me, tried to do the best he could with the talent he had. And I think that D'Antoni, is a bit more of an extremist. And I think will not be indebted to the players in the way that Brett Brown as kind of a humanist was. D'Antoni's a humanist. But I do not think he's going to play around with Tobias Harris pussyfooting from taking threes. I don't think that works. I think D'Antoni says no. Nah, you're not doing that anymore. Sit on the bench.
Or could it be D'Antoni to be the one that moves that net neutral rating of Tobias Harris upwards to the green?
It's possible. I mean, I would say in terms of frustrating players, to me, Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris are right up there with guys like Evan Turner and Andre Miller as like players that I have enjoyed watching the least. So to get a coach whose entire brand is not allowing their bullshit, I'm pretty in on.
What D'Antoni's been able to do with certain players, and I'm thinking of like Quentin Richardson, even Amari Stoudemire, I want him on my team at any cost. I think the Sixers would be lucky to have him because I don't think he looks at coaching as what are my pieces and how do I make them work. I think he looks at coaching like, how do I make these pieces transform into their optimum selves? And what
I agree. And again, I'm not saying that cool, he's going to really just throw Tobias on the bench and play Furkan. But what I am saying is that as a new coach, he might have an authority that Brett Brown did not, because he's new, because he's installing his own system. To say, Tobias, you have to shoot that three when it's open. And if you don't, you're going to get less minutes. I'm not like, oh, bench him and punish him. I just can't play you in this lineup because this is what I do.
it was
I'm brought in
designed
to
for
put in
you
my-
to take that shot then. You have to do it. Right.
Exactly. And it's not Brett Brown kind of retrofitting a system for the guys who are there. I don't know. We'll see. I would be excited about it. I'm sure Joel Embiid would not be. As D'Antoni has said, any possession where you post up is a wasted possession. So it's not going to be popular.
We'll see, though. I mean, D'Antoni, Amari Stoudemire was his guy, and I
Didn't
don't
post him up, though.
No, but I'm saying like Joel maybe will change. Joel is also a really smart basketball player, and he's not of the Evan Turner mold, you know. And I see.
I am into it because of what you were saying. That it's like get down or lay down. If I want to turn you into the kind of player that you should be, and if he can't, he can't.
Yeah.
But I'm ready to watch Joel take 15 threes. I want to watch this. I don't want to see this boomer ball that they've been doing for the last year and a half, 2 years, that is based on
Entry ISO.
mid-range jumpers from guys who don't like taking threes. And again, this is not a knock on Brett Brown. I just think he was attempting to make guys work, and for them largely did, and cater to their strengths.
A wet ass
I want it- I want
Papadelle
it-
is
I want it
not-
the other way around.
Right. Yeah, there's rumors that Billy Donovan is up for this job. There's the omnipresent Ty Lue, Jason Kidd, Mark Jackson trifecta with everything, even the Clippers, which is ridiculous. But like, I only say ridiculous because Doc Rivers is fine. Just keep him there. But so there's like 5 viable candidates for this Sixers job, but only one truly exciting one, right? And that would be Dan and crew.
Yeah, and in my mind, Daniel Anthony D'Antoni is by far the most interesting candidate. I mean, I think Lou or Donovan might be average, even above average coaches. I just don't see the product getting more interesting or wildly different from what we've seen. And, part of that is, the contracts that have been ladled out by the front office. They gave Tobias Harris one of the largest contracts in NBA history, top 15 or something like that. They gave Al Horford a lot of money. And we've talked about Horford in the past, but, there's a lot of clamoring to just panic trade him, which I think is foolish because Al Horford is good at his job. And you don't get rid of guys who are good at his job and replace them with guys who are bad at their job and improve.
Right.
It's that simple. Getting rid of Al Horford, who is the best backup center in the league, and replacing him with a shitty wing who might fit better does not make your team a better team. It makes you worse.
Yeah, do not sink that cost just because it's not what you expected. He's expensive. His market value is overpriced, but you're right.
And the other
Beware
part of it
action here.
Yes, sorry to interrupt you. The other part of it here is that because the Sixers have already assigned so much money to Joel, Ben, and Tobias.
Sorry, Tobias is funny.
Tobias. The money doesn't matter. There's no difference functionally for the Sixers from a basketball standpoint. If Horford made $7 million or $100 million, doesn't matter. You're not getting that cash back.
Right.
It's over the cap. They're way over the cap even without him, by $10 million. And that's without even, adding in whoever they can find with a taxpayer exemption. They're so far over the cap. So his contract doesn't matter. So then it comes down to, well, is he valuable to the Sixers? Absolutely. is he actually more valuable to the Sixers because his money doesn't matter than he is to other teams? The answer to that is also yes. If you haven't spent your cap money, Horford is worse for you because he eats up your cap. He doesn't eat up the Sixers cap because the money's gone. Like, I think people really need to rethink their approach to Al Horford. That it's not that he's being paid $27 million to be a backup center or whatever. It's that you have the best backup center in the league. Why would you trade that unless you're getting something good back? And the odds of that happening are low.
Tobias Harris's contract is a little breathtaking. Horford's next 3 years are 27.5, 27, and 26.5.
Well, the other thing about Horford is that final year,
you're right,
it cuts down to, I want to say, about 15.
Yeah.
If you cut him loose. So conceivably, at the end of this year, you're basically trading him with like 1.5 years on his contract.
And his value, if he stays healthy, is just gonna increase because you're closer to that out. But Tobias Harris next 4 years, 34, 36, 37, 39. That's breathtaking, man.
Can I say something that most people will not agree with?
Oh, go off.
I think Joel, Ben, and Horford fit okay.
That makes sense.
The problem here is a Tobias issue. You can't have Tobias with that group. If you had Shake and like a volume shooting two who could really spread the floor, I think you can get away with Ben, Joel, and Al pretty decently. Two of those guys are phenomenal passers. Joel can space the floor. Al can space the floor. If you had a half-court ball handler and a guy who really wanted to shoot threes, I think you're fine. We know that Horford played center in Boston, and he played power forward in Boston. He started next to another big. Look in, Los Angeles. Anthony Davis and JaVale play next to each other. Giannis and Brook Lopez. Having two bigs is not a crazy issue as long as one of them can shoot. And in the Sixers case, both of them can shoot. So, in my opinion, the issue here is Tobias. Because Tobias doesn't work in that group. Because Tobias can only guard power forwards or threes. And in this situation, he now has to guard a perimeter player. And in this situation, he has to only play on the perimeter. He can't drive. He can't do his little post-ups from the elbow. He can't get in the short corner. He can't do the stuff that he likes to do because all of a sudden, where does Ben go? Where does Al go? Where does Joe go? This is a Tobias Harris issue. But to what you just said, he's immovable. Can't do anything with him. So Al has to come off the bench. In a thread that I put up on Twitter, I said that he should exclusively be used as a backup center. I think I phrased that incorrectly. He should start as he should come off the bench as a backup center. But he can absolutely 100% play next to Joel. Like, there's no doubt. The starting lineup that Philly had, which included Josh Richardson and Tobias and Ben and those two, was like +8. They were on pace to win 50 games with that as the starting lineup. They beat Milwaukee. They beat Toronto. They beat the Heat. They beat Boston 3 times. That team was good. They were a 50-win team with that stupid-ass starting lineup. So, they don't need to be separated at all costs. But he does need to come off the bench because you can't do anything about Tobias unless you bench his ass, which I'm fine with.
As a tourist to Sixers Twitter, as a proud member of this podcast, I have to sit next to someone who loves this team quite a bit. So I say this with love. You guys sound crazy. You guys sound like Dolan truthers on the Knicks side. But all of the things you say, check out. I think for me, the more interesting thing is never being discussed. We know what Tobias is. We know what Horford is, and we know their bottoms, their ceilings and basements. Their Luol Dengs and Martell Websters. But I'm interested in seeing Zaire Smith get healthy. I'm interested to see if they can draft Trey Jones at the end of the first round. Those two components change the scope, and you add a Mike D'Antoni. That's a whole different team with a whole different set of concerns, right?
Absolutely. And this is the root of my explanation for why I don't think there's urgency to moving Horford, because he's good. He's the third best player on the team right now. He's a 5-time All-Star. Tobias Harris has never been a winning component on a good team in his professional career. That's not me hating on Tobias Harris. That is literally looking at his career and saying, this guy has never been a major contributor to a winner, to a contender. Not ever. He was the 5th option on Philly last year, and that was a good role with him. And he sucked against Toronto. He sucked. And he sucked in the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to hold that against him overall. The point is, Al Horford is good. He's good. He's a 5-time All-Star. He's been on very good teams. We know who he is. He didn't just get bad because he showed up in Philadelphia. Oh, look, he's on the Sixers. He sucks now. No. You look at his numbers when he's on the court with Ben and without Joel, and he's putting up the same numbers as Boston. Shot 35% from 3. Good defender. Lineups with him and Ben, no Joe, had something like, we're like a +6. They're good. That's playoff team good. Your lineup without Joel Embiid is a playoff team. It's good to go. So my thing is, what you just said. Stop trying to find a silver bullet. Just do the work. Go find some 3-and-D guys. Draft smart. Turn Zaire into something. Matisse is there. Like, do the work. Like, be a real GM. Don't try to sit here and say, okay, we're going to desperately turn, Al Horford into Wiggins. We're going to turn him into Jabari Parker and something. Like, don't go turn him into garbage that makes the team worse. He's good. Joel gets hurt all the time. Like, you're going to need... Al Horford played 2,000 minutes this year. He can do that. Like, he's a good player. Don't get worse because you're panicking.
Yes.
And do the work. You've got 4 second-round picks. You have the 21 pick in the draft. You have the mid-level exception. You have a trade exception from James Ennis. It's about $2 million. You have... Those are 7 different parts that you can use to go find players, get rid of guys, trade guys. You have Josh Richardson, who absolutely needs to be traded.
You can trade him. He's got a nice contract.
And I think you can get more in return for, say, Josh Richardson and a second-round pick in terms of value than you can with just Al Horford. No one's going to give you anything good for Al Horford. He's a negative contract. Josh Richardson, you can get a decent player that maybe a team wants to move on from.
I mean, if you can trick a stupid team like the Knicks, go for it. I'm not saying you shouldn't take Horford off the table. Just no deal out there is worth.
I'm saying you should, right? I'm saying you should. You should not. I'm saying you should not trade him, though. What would that trade be? That hypothetically, the Knicks, the stupidest team out. What trade do they do with the Knicks? Utter morons. Sure, we want Horford. We want to win now. We got CP3 coming in. Let's get Horford. We're a playoff team. Boom, which they would be. Yeah. What do they give you that makes the Sixers better?
I don't see Mitch staying if CP3 is in New York, because I think that's the only piece other teams want from New York. It would have to be Mitch. I think Randall's fine.
So Randall does nothing for Philly. Mitch kind of does nothing for Philly because he can't play aside Joel, and he's
I disagree.
Not a shooter.
I think he does a lot for every team.
No, I think he's awesome. The problem is he has to play with Ben.
But they'll figure it out, man. I mean, yeah, there is a lot of carb-on-carb action going there, even more so, which sounds delicious. But
right, but we're saying, okay, so that's like the deal that Philly could make, right? Okay, you'll give us Mitch, and you'll give us some contracts.
Right.
And we'll add it up. Again, I like Mitch, but I don't think that makes Philly a better team next year. I think it makes them a worse team.
I disagree. There'll be adjustments to be made, definitely. In this vacuum, if you inject Mitchell Robinson and extract Al Horford, it doesn't quite work. But, there's so many moving parts. This is not going to be what we saw this year. I would take Mitch in a hot second.
I mean, I don't think that would make any sense, though. Like, Al Horford is definitely better than Mitch, and I'm a huge Mitch fan, but he also can shoot, which is the primary component that you need from a center with Simmons. I'm with you. Like, Mitch is a great lob catcher, and he's a good athlete, and he can do some awesome stuff. And he's
Most efficient player of all time.
Yeah, he's young, he's talented. I'm a fan. But I'm also like, he can't play with Embiid at all. He's probably a downgrade fit-wise from Horford. And Horford can play with Joel. Like, I don't think that makes you closer to a contender. And that's like the best possible deal that we can come up with a dumb team without having to attach Zaire or assets or taking garbage contracts back is like a downgrade, but a really awesome player.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just living.
And you wouldn't even do that trade.
In New York, I would not want to.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We've come up with a trade that you wouldn't do.
Well,
that
for
I'm like,
Philly,
that-
Philly would, in my opinion. But I also don't live in the moment, which is my problem. So I'm thinking about the future, and I see Mitch being able to stretch a little bit just based off of sizzle reels. But, which is, my life force. It's the spice of my life. But I think he can transform as a pretty awesome player.
I'm not here to argue about how awesome Mitch is or his potential. I'm mostly saying that if you are Philly and you're trying to win a championship right now, that trade does not get you closer next year.
Yeah. Well, to our point about passing, Mitchell Robinson, however much I love him, is not a basketball genius, and Al Horford has a lot of those traits. So sticking with somebody who can see the court and pass like he can as a big has value that Mitch will never have.
And I do think Philly would be exceptionally lucky if they're able to just dump his contract and get back a prospect like Mitchell Robinson. I think they would do it because they want to get out of that money. And that's like the craziest, best idea that anyone's ever had that the Knicks would probably not do.
No. It just doesn't work.
And it still
either.
doesn't necessarily make the Sixers a better contender.
I think it does, but this is way too hypothetical to even go further,
My major point here is that I doubt there are deals around in which you can just give someone Horford and you get back a player who is as valuable as him, a 5-time All-Star, who is the best backup center in the league, and turn you into a better team than you were before, as opposed to trading Josh Richardson and like a high second rounder. I think the return for Josh Richardson is better than the return for Horford, despite the fact that Horford is a much, 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 much better player than Josh Richardson, and ironically, a better fit for that roster.
What's going to happen when inevitably the Sixers kind of tumble towards purgatory and even further towards the Woods and the Knicks and listening to Susie and the Banshees? Are we going to have the same energy about the minutia of this roster?
Absolutely not.
It's just as long as Joe and Ben are there, this is important stuff, right?
To me, that's it, right? Because we can see the writing on the wall. They trade Horford for like 2 junky guys. One is kind of a dead contract. One is like a mediocre but kind of overpaid guard who takes some threes. They also have to attach like a first-round pick or Zaire or something. If I'm Houston, I'm trying to ransack the Sixers with like Eric Gordon and a shit contract. Be like, here you go, man. Eric Gordon, give us Horford.
Buddy Hield is looming.
Exactly. Because Horford is really good, but people think he's bad. And his contract is lousy. No one was saying that contract was horrific when they signed it. People didn't like it, but no one was like, oh my God, this is just a dead contract.
Yeah.
Because they realized that he was a good player.
It's a stake theory. When he doesn't accrue stats, when he ceases to be a walking bucket, everything else becomes a flaw.
You know how many times I've seen people just say, oh, but he's averaging like 6 and 7. Yeah, I know, man.
Yeah.
But the point is, if you're Houston, you're like, look, we'll give you Eric Gordon and like a shitty $10 million contract. Take Al Horford, but you got to attach Zaire Smith in that pick.
Ooh.
And Philly's like, ooh, Eric Gordon, he's a shooter. No one's going to be mad at that. He fits a total position of need.
Zaire didn't help us this year anyway. So.
Oh, yeah, no one likes Zaire. Fans are out on him. They think he's a bust. Number 21 pick, I mean, whatever. Let's do it.
Yeah. Oh, man.
It's free money anyway. And you just get taken to the fucking cleaners by someone like Morey.
Yeah.
where Eric Gordon doesn't really make the team better because he's not that good. You lose your backup center and you replace him with a terrible backup center who doesn't fit well with Ben, and all of a sudden your minutes when Joel off the court suck again, and everyone then blames that on Simmons, and then you have to trade Simmons or Embiid by the end of the year. Like this is the debacle that's on the table. Like this is why I'm so concerned about the Horford move. It has the capability of pulling the tablecloth out from underneath this sloppily constructed Jenga tower.
When the Kings hire a GM, and if that GM is a basketball mind, that's a threat to Philly, I think. Because
Dude, I'm dunking so hard on the Sixers if I'm any GM. It is just a windmill. They are so prone right now to getting their head jammed in the toilet and just flushed repeatedly. They are victims.
There's a threat in Harrison Barnes, Marvin Bagley, and Buddy Hield.
Jabari Parker, baby.
I mean, Parker's contract is weird, right? He has $6 million left, so I don't really care about.
But that's what I mean. The attachment of garbage contracts that the Sixers are happy to get out of.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the fixation Sixers Twitter has with Buddy Hield, other than he's a good shooter. He's older than Joe Biden, so you really don't want him playing basketball. It's not safe. But you don't really. You can get a Buddy Hield with the 21st pick in the draft. In my opinion, I'm a jerk, but I think there's guards out there who can do some damage for the minimum.
Well, I think that's true, and I think again it goes back to doing the work. Go draft some guys. Go find some undrafted free agents. Go do some small trades for guys who are sitting on dudes' benches.
Find DeAnthony Melton. Find those players. Get a Dort. Yeah.
Go find a Duncan Robinson. He was sitting around. So all these guys are sitting around. You just have to do the work. You have to find them and give them a shot.
Dort season.
But I do think, someone like Buddy, I don't think that'd be a terrible trade if it was straight up. But if I'm Sacramento, I'm saying, well, why bother? I got Rashawn Holmes under contract.
Barely. Wait, they extended him, right?
I believe so, right?
I think so.
I think. But if I'm the Kings, I'm like, well, what are we doing with Al Horford? Why do I want Al Horford? If you want me to make this deal, I need Zaire. I need the number 21. I need to slam dunk your head into the toilet.
Yeah. Yep, and the Sixers are going to do something. I just want them to add, find a way to get a Joe Harris and draft a guard at 21. And I think you have those two and Zaire Smith, and you're rolling.
Well, I mean, that's about enough about the Sixers. But sorry about that.
No, I'm into it.
But I was just going to say, I think the only upside of them hiring D'Antoni would be that he would potentially also act as some sort of GM.
Hopefully.
And maybe.
Yeah.
Just because the guys in place are deeply, deeply inept. They can't do anything.
Yeah.
They cannot be trusted not to ruin the team further. They're amateurs.
Yeah. Can we give some love to Houston Twitter and quickly run through their situation? Is there Houston Twitter? No, there's not. I don't.
No. Yeah, sure there is. I don't know what they're going to do as far as a coach goes. That'll be interesting to see who Morey sort of picks out.
I saw on CNBC yesterday that Tillman Fertitta,
the Frittata man,
was on, and the guy point blank was like, Morey, is his job at risk? He's like, no, he's staying. Whatever. You don't trust Tillman, but let's say Morey keeps his job for another run. What do you see happening over there? They have some immovable parts, but some trade partners in New York, Sacramento, and Philly.
I mean, I wonder if they want to stop the Westbrook experiment. They can't really run a center out there with Westbrook unless it was a real stretch five. But they don't seem to have that much interest in it. But there might be someone out there who could be that, like an Al Horford. I mean, legitimately so.
That'd be awesome.
But if you have Westbrook, the center needs to be able to shoot.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely mandatory. I think it's going to be tough for them to move Westbrook. Unless it was somewhere like the Knicks, who just want a star. I know they're flawed. They've got an expensive contract for a couple more years, but get some asses in the seats. Westbrook will make the Garden exciting, and he kind of will.
Yeah, and then
like you would.
and to defend my team, they haven't done this in the last 5 or since Melo left, so this would be a return to that mentality.
I mean, honestly speaking, if I'm the Knicks and it doesn't cost me anything,
I like Westbrook. Yeah.
and you're like, well, okay, we'll just cut loose some of those power forwards we have sitting around, and say, let's have Westbrook run the show for 2 more years.
Westbrook,
more
RJ, and
years.
Mitch, let's go, man. I would go. Let's go.
Yeah, if Houston's just like, you don't have to give us anything. Just give us a couple expiring contracts, and we'll cut them loose and figure something else out. I don't think that's the kind of deal that Morey would drive. But
And Westbrook's on the hook for 41, 44, and a player option for 47. So it's not that every year gets better.
well, I mean, it's an insane amount of money.
I know, but it's not like a longer contract. It's not 5 years. You know, it's like you're
Well,
looking.
that's true. The cap is at 115 right now.
Yeah, but the Knicks are the not in the NBA, but the last in. They have all the space. You know, it doesn't matter.
No, I get that, and I'm saying it's an okay deal. But like when you're looking at it and you're like, he's going to be taking up half the cap for the next 3 years. I don't think you have to say to Morey, you know, we're going to give you some parts with that. We're going to give you some picks. I think you're like, you know what? We'll eat that contract if you want to get out.
I'm not mad at it.
No, I would not be either. I just would not give you shit for him.
Oh yeah, you would make Morey squirm, but have the Knicks made any other GM squirm ever?
I mean, look, shout out to them for taking down the Clippers with the Morai.
Yeah.
Morai did basically nothing. They got a first-round pick for him.
I gotta defend the Morai. I wanted this heater. I was gonna tell the interns to go in. He had a pretty decent series. He wasn't gonna be the alpha like he was in New York. He shot okay. He was fine. He rebounded some. He was the enforcer. He was a dog. He was fine. He came true to his promise.
No, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I'm only saying that was a good move where the Knicks
Yes.
sort of made someone squirm.
What
You know,
the
they
hell
got
was
a
that?
first round pick out of it.
Love it, man. It was. It brought it. It was my Super Bowl, Ben. But yeah, I don't know. I think Houston. I hope they run back this strategy. I think not having D'Antoni there is going to be an issue. I can see another coach like Billy Donovan being like, you know, we have to make sure we have a center on the roster and then end up playing him or not taking valuable shots. But Morey's still there. If he's still there, he will do something interesting because he always does. And flipping Westbrook is not beyond his powers, right?
Absolutely not. And I think he'll hire someone that fits with his philosophy. I don't think it's going to be an adversarial hire unless it's coming down from the Frittata man. Oh, I want to get, you know, this old school guy. And then it's a
Frittata.
weird clashing with Morey because that wouldn't make sense. Whoever he gets, I believe, would be as progressive as D'Antoni was. Maybe there's just more of a, I don't know, a merging of personalities. I don't really know what happened in Houston for them to part ways because they do seem naturally,
Yeah.
aesthetically, strategically to be an ideal fit, but they weren't.
Yeah, I wonder really what happened over there. I thought D'Antoni was going to re-up, but maybe there's some truth to... nope, I'm not even going to go there. I was going to throw some slander around, but...
Thank God you didn't, and that way we can end this as the perfect slander-free pod.
Oh, yeah. Only positive takes on cookies.
Tell them Cactus Jacks.
I love cookies.
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 Cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.